welcome to this week's Voices in Hyperspace. I'm Davion Smith, aka Legendary Black Lion.
I am Nita. I like to paint.
Hey, it's Sunday.
Yes, so before we get into this week's episode, a lot of us have been doing some cool things. Nita has picked up quite a bit of cool, fun gigs with her painting. I know I'm just throwing this on you, but Nita, can you share with us a little bit of some of your painting escapades?
Yeah, I have been painting at an amusement park here in San Diego called Belmont Park. I did painting there during Comic-Con weekend. I had a lot of fun, and they loved me so much that they invited me back for 2 months for Beachside Fall Fest. That is from September 9th through October 29th. So I'll be spending a lot of time at Belmont Park and also a lot of time with a bunch of preschool kids during the week doing fun crafts and other painty-like activities. Yeah, so the next few months I am going to be quite busy.
That is awesome. And Mel has been constantly working on her project. She's an author. So can you tell us a little bit about the progress in your project?
I am still on chapter 11. I had to condense a lot of what I wanted to do. I had a plan for my character to be out in space for a while, but that's not going to work. So I just had to do a lot of other things to help me with my thought process that had nothing to do with the thought process, like working out.
Oh, yeah.
And I got pretty inspired last night. I went to a show by a group called One More Time. It's a Daft Punk. Yeah, so that I got to geek out and dance, and it was because it's so like tech and sci-fi inspired. I got inspired. So hopefully. And I emailed you guys the well, except for Sunday, I think it's Sunday, the first chapter of the book if you want to read an enormously rough.
No, thank you very much. I'm gonna get into that once I have a few moments to read, but I very much appreciate that. I'm excited to take a look at your work.
I care what y'all think.
Yeah, we'll definitely share some feedback. But just in general, I'm just excited that we're sharing these projects. This space is full of creative people, and I'm so excited to be able to celebrate with you all. So this is episode 3, season 1, episode 3 of Babylon 5. It's called Born to Purple, and the title kind of gives you a little bit of a hint about what the show is about. And also, this is because I've watched it a couple of times. This episode does give you a little foreshadowing. So Commander Sinclair is looking for Lando, and he finds him in an adult entertainment establishment. That's what we'll call it. And there's a really interesting song being played. The only lyrics are "Set me free, set me free." I think it's kind of funny because you'll get this a lot in this show, where they really kind of go for making the background music a little bit more detailed, more realistic. Later in the season, I'm sorry, is it the same season? Later in the series, they actually have a jazz singer on as a guest, and it's a pretty cool thing that they do to add a little bit more atmosphere to the show. Because in a lot of other shows,
so cool. I didn't even notice that, but I love it when the music has meaning.
Yeah, and like I said, it's some good foreshadowing. Typically in sci-fi, they just kind of have like some random, I would call it like new age ambient sounds, like some synth crystal background music, and someone singing in like a nonsense language, like a nonsense alien language. But I think Babylon 5 kind of avoids that, and it just makes it a little bit more relatable, which I think is pretty cool. But so Sinclair is looking for Lando, and Lando is there for a couple of reasons. One, he's been avoiding some diplomatic talks. So if people don't remember, Lando is kind of he's kind of in a position where he's an ambassador. He's used to having power and privilege, but really he understands that his position on Babylon 5 is kind of like a nothing position. So he's taking full advantage of it. He's drinking, he's partying, he's gambling, and he's at this adult establishment and he's looking for a very specific dancer. And what he points Sinclair to, he's like, hey, look, this is exactly what I'm waiting for, and it is a beautiful Centauri dancer. Now, we know what the Centauri males look like, right?
Yes.
What? How would you
party in the back?
Like the hair? Yeah, the hair stands up. So what does the Centauri woman look like?
The European definition of beauty.
Yes. Also, what about what's a defining feature for the Centauri woman?
She's bald with a ponytail.
Yep, she is smack bald, and I think throughout the rest of the series, that's how you will see the Centauri women. They're bald, and the men have like the flamboyant hairdos,
like peacocks.
Yes, exactly. Yep. Exactly.
That part.
Another thing that's interesting, we are also introduced to a Narn female. Ambassador Jakar is also, he's with Sinclair, but he's also in this adult establishment. And just as he is about to agree with Lando and share a drink, Kodar, she appears just kind of like out of nowhere. And she introduces herself as his new diplomatic staff. Now, how would you describe the Narn female?
Very much like the male Narn, just smaller a little bit.
Just slightly smaller. Yeah. And because of the actress underneath the makeup, you can see slightly more, I guess you would say more, what's recognized as more feminine features underneath the makeup. But they don't really look terribly different.
Yeah, they looked very unisex.
Yeah, and she's also pretty aggressive because a human hits on her and she basically like throws him across.
She
the room.
bites.
Yeah, she bites. And in this part, I put down my quick notes. Garibaldi is a snitch. He totally snitched out everybody in this part.
He stays telling on people like, yo, mind your business.
Yep. So what happens is they have this dance sequence, and this is something I'm always curious about with these different dance performances in these shows, because they don't really hire dancers. They have people who do a little bit of gyration, some flares with their hands, and then you kind of don't see what the dance is, but everybody's up applauding and like, oh my god, it was so great and wonderful. Again, I would say that's just kind of like a sci-fi trope. That's something that I think started with Star Trek as well. Like they just like they have the dancer, but really she's just kind of like shaking her hips kind of to the music, but not really what some of the dancing you will see in like later sci-fi like today. So Lando goes back to his quarters and the dancer is just waiting in his bed. And I think that is kind of wild. Like they've immediately made a connection and she's drawn him in. He's enamored with her. And they do.
Didn't get a feel that they had a prior relationship?
Because he was waiting for her to be on stage. And
yes.
Yeah, so he was anticipating her. I didn't feel like he just saw her for the first time that he was watching her.
But I think I thought that she was a prostitute, and that's why he was waiting for her, because she was the one that he paid for. That's the relationship that I thought they had at first.
Yeah, I would say it kind of comes across like that just from those few minutes in the scene. And you have to also we kind of make a few shortcuts because he's an ambassador. He's powerful. He is able to command some wealth, so he can do that. And people kind of expect that, right? That's part of the corruption of people in positions of power, right? We're accustomed to seeing that in our society. So when they depict that, it's like, oh yeah, well, this is what powerful people do. And I think it's done like that on purpose because we're setting up Lando to take several turns in this story. And you'll see this is a very Lando heavy story, and we'll focus on him a lot more. Now, some of the other characters, there's some really interesting things going on. Garabaldi, he's doing a scan and he finds out that someone's been sending messages using a restricted channel. And this really annoys him. And so, like I said, Garibaldi's a snitch. So he immediately reports it to Commander Sinclair. And we go back to Sinclair. He's in the waiting room for the council with Ambassador Jakar. And again, they're waiting on Lando, and he's nowhere to be found, right? And at this point, Sinclair is also very annoyed. And it's funny because there are a lot of annoying things going on in that scene. Veer, Lando's diplomatic staff, is sitting there playing a handheld game. And he's going to town on that thing, right? And basically Sinclair is like, hey, Veer, you need to go get Lando so we can resume these negotiations, so we can resume these talks. And they send him off. He leaves. And Veer leaves, and so does Talia Winters. She's been around in those negotiations, and she explains that, often those negotiations will tax her because she's using her telepathic powers, and the strong emotions are they drain her energy. And I wanted to ask you all. So since we've met Talia Winters the first time, what impression do you all get of her in this episode overall? Because she's starting to make a few more appearances.
Felt like she's very much wanting to follow the rules, but there's a word, like, not noble, but she wants to do good things, just not in a way that would jeopardize herself.
Yeah, like she's
loyal.
I'm sorry, go ahead, say that again.
She's very loyal to the Psych Corps.
Yes.
But she's also pretty proud of being a psychic and knows what good it can do and believes in the good that it can do. But also, like, being loyal to the Psych Corps somewhat puts a limit on what she can do. Like the last one, she wanted to help, but it was against the rules to help. And this time it was, I can only help if it's within the rules.
Yeah. And this kind of shows a little bit more of that dynamic, that she's actually proactive in her involvement with the negotiations, because that, it's her job. And Sinclair, he basically emphasizes the importance of wanting to be able to reach this peace agreement to show that Babylon 5 is actually achieving the goal that it was designed for. But it's kind of interesting too, because everyone that's involved except for Sinclair just doesn't want to be there. And it that just shows kind of like the overall struggle of approaching this mission of peace through diplomacy is like, you get a sense that the parties involved either don't want to be there, they're participating in bad faith, or they're shirking their responsibilities, like similar to like what's going on with Lando at this point. He's still in bed with the dancer, and this is the first time we actually hear her name. He calls her Adira, and so now she has a name, which is great. What is that? That's like one of the requirements on the Bechdel test. She actually has a name, and I think this episode pretty much fails the rest of it. Do you all know what the Bechdel test is?
I was trying to come off the mic to ask, what is that?
Okay. The Bechdel test comes from a webcomic And hold on, I'm gonna actually pull it up for you because it's a really cool tool. It started off more of as a joke, but people have been actually applying it, and it's a pretty cool tool of analysis. So the Bechdel test is a way of evaluating whether or not a film or other work of fiction portrays women in a way that is sexist or characterized by gender stereotype. To pass the Bechdel test, a work must feature at least two women. These women must talk to each other, and their conversation must concern something other than a man. And I think people have amended it to where the work must feature two women who have names, and these women must talk to each other, and their conversation must concern something other than a man or like the leading male character in the film. And not too many films are passing this because a lot of times they use the women characters to forward the story, and the story is usually about the man, so they'll use the woman to talk about the man.
It's funny. It makes me think of Barbie. My goddaughter just recently saw that, and I had no interest. And she reported back about how it was all about patriarchy bad.
Oh yeah, I haven't seen it yet, but I've heard about it. I'm interested. That actually sounds pretty interesting.
Doesn't it feel weird to be interested? Like I'm like, listening to her makes me want to watch it, but it's Barbie. I don't want to see that at all. Like I'm gonna lose brain cells, but she seemed to describe it pretty well where I think I'll be okay.
I mean, it might be a brain cell burner depending on how they address issues in the movie. But I hear they do get pretty deep. I mean, of all the movies made about video games, toy products, and board games, it seems like they've actually gone towards the addressing social issues route with this one, which, like I said, that
maybe we'll have to go watch it together.
Maybe. Sounds pretty interesting. All right, so anyway, while Lando is still laying in bed with Adira, we hear about his lukewarm feelings about his jobs and his prospects as an ambassador. He basically feels trapped in his position, which is, I mean, when I first saw this show, I kind of had the sense that, ambassador is like this honorable position. But, as I grew up and learned a little bit more about diplomacy and, applied more of what I've learned about that to watching the show several times, I'm starting to realize he was given this job to kind of keep him under control. He's at the whims of the Empire. He can't really exercise any power on his own. And so he's kind of just hanging out at this space station waiting to be given orders. And in the meantime, I'm going to drink, I'm going to gamble, I'm going to have fun.
Is he somebody's nephew that's out of control?
Pretty much. Not like in the show, no, but like he comes across like that.
Got it.
Yeah. At this point, Lando presents Adira with a charm. He gives her... Wait, no, I'm sorry. So Adira is laying charm on Lando very thick. She's like, talking about how great he is. And Lando, he kind of has the feeling like, you care about me for my position, right? But he gets called away back to the council chambers by Veer. And then we, he finally decides to get up, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to go. We go back to seeing now at the command deck, Ivanova is dismissing Garibaldi's concern about someone breaching security and using the gold channel unauthorized. And I wanted to ask you all about the way Ivanova is behaving in this part, because one, I already have my feelings about Garibaldi up to this point. He's a snitch, he's a rat, he's a cop, and Ivanova doesn't enjoy Garibaldi's company in the first place. And so now she's kind of rubbing in his face the fact that he's being eluded. I want to kind of get you all's opinion about Ivanova's behavior towards Garibaldi at this point.
I feel like she's a cop and that she doing the same thing, just not taking like the security threat seriously. Just I think she's the one that he ratted out in the previous episode, or
Yeah.
she is.
Yeah, he
Okay,
gave her
so
up to the telepath, like, oh well, you can find her at this restaurant after work.
yeah. So it kind of feels like a co-worker situation where they are not getting along very well is what it made me think of.
And they are two very strong personalities. In that previous episode, you do get a sense that Ivanova is just this tragic character, right? They're trying, they gave her this weird Russian affectation, right? Because she, her background is Russian. But in this conversation, she comes across as annoyed by Garibaldi bothering her about security. But is something different about the way that she's interacting with him. She's kind of like, she's even helping him. She's like, oh, let me help you. Let's look at the logs. Let's look at the records. And they're like, nope, no data breach. And he's like, I could have sworn it was just right there. And she just makes fun of him from that point. She's just like, she starts this running gag of like, oh, maybe it's the gremlins. You got these glitches in your system. You're going crazy. And then Garibaldi runs off, and she kind of smiles like, okay, yeah, I kind of got him on that one, right? I got rid of the annoying guy, and she seems that she feels satisfied with that.
Yeah, she really seemed like she was trying to just get rid of him.
Yeah.
Like, get out of my space. Why are you touching my stuff?
Yeah. I mean, Ivanova, I was saying in just 2 episodes, she comes across as she runs a tight ship on the command deck. She got people pretty afraid of her. And the one person who can kind of waltz in whenever he feels like it is Garibaldi. And that has to be very annoying. He does have to listen to her, though, which is, she is his superior officer, though, right?
So is his character the kind of person that just walks in just because? As from my recollection, anytime he comes into any space, that's not like his own. It's for business.
Right.
Like he's fulfilling a duty. And I wanted to say something earlier about calling him a snitch and things, but we kind of glossed over it real quick.
No, go ahead.
Isn't it his job to be concerned about security issues? And isn't his concern about someone using a what was it called? Confidential, a secret line?
Yeah, it's a restricted line.
Restricted, that's the word, yes. From what I understand, what his job is, his concern about this restricted line is reasonable and within his duties. So why are we giving him such like derogatory connotation?
I agree with that. What I'm what I'm calling Garibaldi a snitch on is things that don't pertain to his job, where he's given personal information about his coworkers or the ambassadors or whatever when they are trying to be alone or they don't want to be in the presence of certain people. He just easily and freely gives it up. He's like, oh, you can find Ambassador Lando in the strip joint. You can find Ivanova after hours at this restaurant. He kind of puts a lot of people, he puts them in positions that makes them uncomfortable, kind of against their will. And he, it comes across as kind of something for fun too. But you're right. Him being the chief security officer, he definitely should be concerned about the security of the communications channel. But I think he also enjoys the concept of knowing things that other people don't and that he can be a source of important information on the station. Like there's a certain type of currency for him, social currency for being the guy that knows. And it crosses over from his job to personal personal social relations.
I don't see it that way.
Part of
Like
it seems like, oh, go ahead, sorry.
like when I don't know, Sinclair needed to be found for something serious.
Mm-hmm.
He told so and so where to find him. When the lady was asking for help on getting like improving her relationship with this other lady, he was like, all right, well, maybe you should do this thing, and this is where she's at. He's not, I don't see it as him like abusing any kind of information, but really using the things that he knows when it matters. And for those places where people are going to be that are, I don't know how much we want to say public, but it's not like Lando was hiding at the adult establishment. So I just don't see the abuse to be calling him a snitch like that. But go ahead, Mel.
I thought it's slightly forced that like everyone else has a role and the story it shows you and tells you what their role is. Garibaldi hasn't had too many opportunities within the storyline to show that he's really good at having knowledge of things and understanding the people around. So they give him these these kind of insequential knowledge to throw out without him actually doing any real detective work that has to do with his real job. So that's why it kind of feels like he's crossing a line, even though he's technically supposed to know that stuff. It feels less like he's actually security and more like he's just nosy. But it falls within his job and his character design to know this information. But the way they put it out is like he's just, gossiping. And then his personality doesn't help either because everyone else is serious and or diplomatic, and he's the 90s street cop. So it really feels out of place. It feels like he's just palling around with the boys when I know where so and so is. In conclusion, it just seems a little forced. They don't have any they could have really put him in a situation. He could have did some actual detective work and found out where Lando was instead of, I mean, it made sense to send his assistant, but that could have been a place where he could have been nosy because he was supposed to actually be there. When he's telling people where others are, and it's not important, it's not a part of his job, then it just sounds nosy.
I don't nosy for him, because what I understand nosy is you are the one seeking information, but he already has it. Like he already knows. So, and from what I've seen, and I don't know, like I could have fallen asleep, but I don't see Garibaldi asking people, where can I find Sinclair? Where can I find these other people? It's like he already knows these things, and I concluded in my mind about his character is that this is why he's good at security, because he knows a lot of things about people. Maybe he just pays attention and knows, because like I said a moment ago, Lando wasn't exactly hiding. He didn't sneak. His presence in the adult establishment wasn't like off in some corner where there's a dark shadow, so maybe he's just paying attention and other people are not, but that's what makes good security people. It's attention to detail.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like the attention to the detail that they've given him doesn't seem as important as everyone else. So it doesn't feel the same way to some people.
Even though
His job, because if something happens, he would need to know. And at a at random. If there was an emergency, all of a sudden they find out there's a shooter and they're looking for somebody. Like he would automatically already know, which is very important. But I just want to know where he is. Doesn't seem as important to what his role is. And then I think the personality just kind of. I think some people they might look at his personality before they look at what he's actually doing. You're looking at what he's actually doing,
Yeah.
but the way he does it seems kind of cheeky, like not as important as everybody. It's the personality that blends with it.
That's more of the way that I'm looking at it. I agree with Mel that it is more the way that he does it, because Nita, you're correct. It is his job to know these things, and we haven't gotten enough episodes to show how and why he knows things. That's going to come across, but it also, like what we're seeing in this episode, is Garibaldi is thorough, and it bothers him when something is happening and he's not sure about it. He doesn't know why it's happening. I think in the last couple of episodes, you do see him do some detective work, or you'll see later in this episode, he does some deduction to help save the day. And it shows that he's actually good at his job. He's really good at his job. It's just that his personality rubs certain people the wrong way. Right. For the moment. And he's another one of those characters that goes through a really amazing arc, and where he ends up is going to be very interesting, but it's very different from where he's starting out right now. There's so much more to learn about him. And just right now, he's coming across, like, his interaction with Ivanova is more kind of like the comic relief in this part of the story right now. And then it gets pretty serious later on. So when we get back to where we are, we follow Adira back to her quarters. The lights come on. Someone's already in her quarters waiting for her. And it's this alien guy named Dracus. He's a truly awful person. He's basically torturing her. They have an arrangement. She is a slave, and he basically somehow got her, whatever their relationship is. Maybe she's his slave, and he's using her to basically infiltrate Lando and get a hold of some personal files. They call it the Purple Files. And this is where we start to learn a little bit more about Centauri culture, and just kind of like the web that is woven with Ambassador Lando and these talks and some other things going on. He's torturing her with like this shock glove, which, this is horrible. But what the information that Dracus is trying to get is dirt that Lando's family has been collecting on other families. And what we learn about Centauri culture is everybody's doing this. Everybody is collecting as much dirt and controversy and scandal on each other, and they collect it, and they're just waiting for the right time to use it. Lando, and it's not just like what one person is collecting, it's the whole family, which I think is pretty interesting. This kind of sounds like it makes me think of, on one hand, like Victorian era aristocracy, people who are looking for scandal to do power plays, one family versus another, or one aristocrat versus another to get more land and property. Which, I mean, the Centauri, they're pretty pompous, right? But what we're seeing is other people have taken notice, and they're trying to take advantage of this. And Dracus's purpose is he wants to be able to have this information to sell on the black market, so he could basically get rich off of it. It is noted that the Centauri who do not take up this practice do not end up in positions of power, and they most likely end up enslaved. And I thought that was really interesting. So it kind of opens a little bit more. It sheds a little bit more light on the Centauri And maybe this is why Lando feels a little bit more trapped in his position too. He comes across as this fun-loving ambassador guy, somebody's uncle, as Sunday would say. Not nephew, but somebody's uncle. And then he has to do this job where he has to get dirt on people just in case he's called on. And he has to keep this information like encrypted. Dracus wants the information because if he, it could take down almost any of the houses in the Centauri Republic. He also knows that a Narn would pay a fortune to get that information, and that's what he wants. He wants to sell this to one of the Narn, and he wants to make a fortune off of that. Then he gives Adira a really cool sci-fi device. This is the Mind Probe. And he tells her, like, you're going to use the Mind Probe. I know you already know how to use it. And this tells me that they've done something similar before. I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on that whole interaction with Dracus. The actor basically hammed up that whole scene, but I wanted to know what were your initial thoughts about Dracus and finding out Adira is his slave.
It was quite disturbing because I am in support of sex work, and when she was looked at as whether it was a prostitute or a call girl or whatever her label might have been, to then find out no, she's like not of her own volition being forced to do these things, it disgusted me. And then even the Centauri culture at all, like, it's one thing that you're all entitled and what's the word that you gave me this morning, babe?
Arrogant.
Arrogant. But you also like are aware and just allowing slavery to happen, under your watch. And instead of doing something about it, you're taking advantage of the situation. And I know that there's going to be some turn of events later in the episode, but it wasn't giving me any warm and fuzzies about them as a culture as a whole, the Centauri, that is. What species is Dracus?
I was going to ask the same thing. He doesn't look like any of the other characters at all. Not in this episode or any other time in the series.
So you can be slaved out not only to your own people, but to just anybody in the galaxy. That's what's up.
Maybe. And that again, that points to kind of like the galactic economic structure. Maybe some cultures practice slavery and some choose not to, but they're not gonna fight for people who do. They're not gonna fight for people who are in slavery. Especially, like, look at it. They're on Babylon 5. Babylon 5 does have like this economic hierarchy. They acknowledge that it exists, but there's nothing happening to address it. So there are, poor people, starving people, people who resort to violence for, whatever their situation is on the station. And then there's a whole lot of other things. And I look at this as like they want to, the writers want to make sure that they can mine some very familiar situations. They don't want to think too hard about like why would there be slaves on a space station that is commanded by Earth. But then again, maybe off screen or at some time in the past there was some treaties that were signed that says, okay, we're not going to interfere with your culture's economic systems as long as you don't, attack us or something, something like that.
We're going to overlook the problems, just so we don't have to fight you for what we believe is right.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm going to pass on that.
I kind of felt like it also reflected the idea that, like, they have this vastness of space and knowledge and cultures that they can feed off of and learn, but they still stay in their little holes mentally and physically Yeah. Because like she was called his property, but you're going to do this because you're my property, and they just kind of respect it, and for some reason because that's what they do.
Yeah.
Kind of like they respecting the Centauri owning what's the other species?
The Narn, the
The
Narn.
Nard. They,
Yeah.
they are currently in possession of it, so why should you want it? Like
Right.
they don't, yeah, they don't see past what is actually, they only see what's in front of them. They don't see past anything. They don't see the potential of anything. It's just, this is mine.
And it also kind of shows you kind of how very shallow the politics are. Earth and the Alliance of Non-Aligned, the Council of Non-Aligned Worlds, they just don't want to fight. They don't want war, so they'll agree to almost anything. Like, yeah, you want slavery, as long as we don't go to war, that's fine. Oh, did you encroach on this territory? Hey, as long as we don't go to war, you can just have it. It sounds very UN to me. United Nations,
Yeah.
NATO.
Yeah, and it's like this. There's such a teeter. Like one of the other episodes, I forgot which one it was. Like I think it was the last one where it's like, if we don't know what this ship is, if we hit it, if we attack it, we could go to war.
Right.
Like any little thing we do can put us to war. So they're on eggshells all the time, just making sure nobody gets pissed off. Especially a people who's as pompous as they are,
Yep.
to own slaves, to only have their only purpose in life is to have title.
Mm-hmm.
So and to do very little. And that was another thing that I got from that. Like he keeps talking about how big the Centauri empire used to be, and how they're crumbling and it's just not working anymore. Like, but you all get your jobs based on being able to, your ability to blackmail other people. So you don't actually know how to do your job. How do you know how to get your job if the only way you get your job is blackmailing people?
Wow,
Yeah.
that was a good point.
All right, so the next scene, Adira, she's meeting with Lando. And this is where Lando presents Adira with a gift. It is a jeweled brooch that apparently belonged to one of the matriarchs in his family, one of his ancestors, and it's like this beautiful jeweled brooch, right? He suggests, like, hey, let's go out to eat. And Adira is like, well, people will see us. What will they say? And Lando, he doesn't care. He's like, look, they'll say that Lando is a very lucky man. So they go out to eat in public, and he's making a big old scene about being with her. He's laughing loud, slamming the table, and everybody sees Lando with Adira. I believe at this point Sinclair also sees her, and they make a statement about how happy he looks. So then they go. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, babe, to interrupt you, but that is just fueling my disgust for his arrogance, because you say that you care about this person and you want to be seen with them and you're so proud of her, but you're not even in tuned and paying attention to, like, the material conditions that she's in, or whether she's choosing to dance like because she enjoys it or not. Like, even before he knew her position and status in their society, he was taking advantage of her anyway.
Yeah.
So when you do find out, it ain't no surprise. You've been being a jerk this whole time.
Yeah, and he goes in depth. He talks about how he feels a sense of emptiness behind the titles and position and the so-called power that's practiced by the Centauri. But he makes a big show of being with her, and it could, depending on the viewer, it comes across as, oh, Lando's out having a great time. But I look at it, it really isn't about her. It's more about him. He's defying convention so he can do what he wants. And she just so happens to be the person that's with him while he's doing that. And she adds a bonus to it because she is a dancer, a sex worker. And so it could come across as scandal, but he's not hiding it. So it's a public affair. And he's kind of like challenging the convention. It's like, okay, say something. What you gonna do, right?
Their whole culture just comes off as like a personification of, I don't know if you can personify this because it's a personality type. Oh no, what do you call them? Narcissism. Like,
Yes.
she's narcissistic supply for him. Like,
Yes.
yeah, I'm not supposed to, but see, like, bet anybody do anything about it because I had this title, blah blah blah. I'm gonna be shown with this pretty girl because she's pretty, and I get to have something pretty beside me because I think I'm ugly. I'm trying to make up for what I don't have. Or he does have a power dynamic over her. He realizes that, and I think that's why he's with her. It's like, oh, this pretty girl is just going to feed into me no matter what I do or say or look like. All the things that he doesn't like about himself.
And
I see narcissism all over.
yeah, and I, without giving away too much, we'll see that all through Lando's arc. So while that's going on, we see that Garibaldi once again traces a breach in security. Someone has accessed the gold channel, and once again he's not able to trace it. He now goes back to the command center, running several programs. Ivanova's not there at the moment, but he's trying to figure out, like, okay, so someone is breaching the gold channel. I'm not going crazy. When Ivanova does show up, she's basically talking him through the steps that she would take to try to find it. And so they do it together. Nothing turns up. Ivanova does a scan of her own, and it shows no authorized access to the channel. And then she smirks and looks at Garibaldi again. It's like, are you sure that someone is breaching this thing? So we kind of got a pattern with these two. He notices a breach. He tries to bring it to someone's attention. She shows up. Nothing's traceable. So now, I'm sorry, but as an audience member, it's like, okay, something's up, and something's up with her. Back at their quarters.
It was
go ahead.
Quite confusing for the position that she has to not be taking his concerns seriously.
Yeah, like it's starting to come. It's starting to feel, as an audience member, which this is what good writing does. You start to feel suspicious of her, which, I think that's done on purpose, and I think it's done well. So now back at Adira's quarters, Lando and Adira, they return from dinner, and basically she drugs him. She drops something in it. She roofies him. I don't know if this is gonna be a bad thing to say on the show, but she slips something in his drink, and he's out. He slips into unconsciousness very quickly. And then she grabs the mind scanner and she gets to work. And before I tell you how I feel about this, I wanted to know, how do you all feel about what Adira did and what she was doing in this scene? Because, she was ordered to do it, but I just wanted to get your thoughts.
You want to go, Mel?
I thought there was a bit of, she did actually was concerned with him. Like, she wanted to be able to do what she's supposed to do because she doesn't feel like she has a choice, but she didn't want to hurt him by doing it. And I felt like by giving him the drink, if he had just drank the drink and passed out, he would have woke up a little more suspicious, even though she left the brooch to make it suspicious and left and didn't say anything. But I felt like the way that she kissed him as he passed out was a way for her to, like, make it easier on him when the drug took its effect. So she was trying to be caring and what I want to say. She didn't really want to hurt him, even though it was her job to hurt him more than that's pride you messing with. He's stealing.
Yeah. So Lando is out cold, and so I apologize for even bringing this up. This reminds me of a lot of the manosphere discussions when people in that whole genre start talking about how if a woman drugs a man, isn't that just as bad as a man violating a woman? And while it is I'll say it's bad. It's not the same thing. She kind of pulled a Cardi B. She drugged him, stole some stuff, left. He was victimized in that situation, but it was, you have to think, the way I look at it is you have to look at the power dynamic. Like, Adira was not acting of her own volition. She's basically under threat of violence now. And Lando being a powerful male actually places him in the position of being the oppressor. And is you can kind of say like, okay, so a person shouldn't break the law, but it happening to him, it's kind of like, I mean, somebody's gonna do it, right?
Yeah, because he's breaking the law himself. Like, is it legal to be getting dirt in order to get the positions that people are in? And everybody want to talk about the law when it's the poor, impoverished people doing it. But when the rich people is doing it, then that's just good business skills.
Right. Exactly.
That's strategy.
It shines a real highlight on the double standard. And you're trying to hold people who are in the position of the oppressed to a standard that the oppressor doesn't hold. It's only, the laws are for you and not for me, basically. But we can go ahead and quickly turn away from that because I don't want to have that discussion on this episode right now. I think there could be other spaces that will be more appropriate, but I just wanted to just point that out. But anyway, she uses the mind scanner and she gets the codes for his purple files, which did y'all catch what the code what the code is?
Him being pompous.
Pretty much.
It's like wine, women, something like.
It's like wine, women, and riches, right?
Which is what he uses the purple files to get,
basically. Right. Yeah. So it's like, oh, poor Lando, you're being drugged and stolen from, you jerk. Who makes their password for dirt, or the reward that the reward you're gonna get from it? I don't know. But that again shows a little bit more of what the character is like. Lando wakes up and then he realizes like, oh, my stuff was stolen. Because I guess whatever the drug is in the mind scanner, it doesn't erase his mind. It just gives her access to it. So it seems like he knows what he told her and he knows what she was after. And he runs to Sinclair and he explains like, okay, my purple files were stolen. Those files cannot. Oh, he says he cannot file an official report because if he does, it will get like the officials from Centauri involved, and so in his it could cause so many scandals that it would compromise his career. So he's more.
Who he was having that conversation with? That wasn't Garibaldi. That was the other guy, right?
Sinclair.
Yeah. So yet again, another situation where I don't know. I felt like it compromised Sinclair to hear this and then use it to his benefit instead of like recognizing that yet again this alien civilization that y'all trying to coexist with is on some BS.
Yes, but I mean, and Sinclair, his position is, well, I'm gonna try to prevent conflict at all, enemies necessary, right? So he's gonna keep his mouth shut. He's gonna help the ambassador so he can get the ambassador, coax him to finally go to these treaty talks, right? And in fact, I think that's what that Sinclair was trying to talk to him about. He's like, hey, we really need you. He goes, look, Lando's like, look, I'll go, but here's my problem. I need you to help fix my problem before I do anything for you, right? This is diplomacy. And Sinclair's like, okay, cool. In the meantime, Garibaldi finally catches who is using the gold channel. And it is Commander Susan Ivanova. And what did we discover she was doing when she was breaching the gold channel?
Wasn't she talking to her pops?
Yes.
And he was dying, yeah?
Yep.
And he probably wished he had a boy, but he had a girl that grows up to try to be a boy for him. I could be exaggerating that part.
Yeah. So those times that the channel was being breached, she was accessing his hospital room or whatever. I guess he was in hospice. And we once again get an extremely tragic scene with Lieutenant Commander Susan Ivanova. Her father gives his last words and pretty much dies on the screen. Now, Garibaldi sees this and he's like, "Oh." But it's two things. One, he's like, "Okay, it's Ivanova," but then he also sees like this is a very special situation. And he doesn't confront her at first. We switch back to Sinclair. So the situation is Lando and Adira are trying their hardest to find. Lando and Sinclair are trying to find Adira. She's she's gone to ground. They don't know where she is. They first go back to the strip club and they are asking around like, okay, how can we find Adira? And basically, what was it? Lando offered a lot of money to find her, and then everybody decided they were going to speak up. And at that point, they learned that she was in the alien sector. So she didn't go straight back to Dracus. She went into hiding, and I think she was afraid for her life. She knew that, okay, if I share these files with Dracus, either Dracus is going to kill me or Lando or one of the other Centauri are going to kill me. So she's hiding for her life. And it turns out that Dracus is actually listening in on this conversation, and he sends his guys in to find Adira as well. Do you all have any thoughts on what happens here in this point?
No.
It's pretty like forward. There's nothing to really analyze, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of where it's like the chase, right? We have the bad guy is looking for the girl, the good guys are looking for the girl, and she's in a desperate situation, right?
It does kind of fall into that sequence, that the 90s TV show sequence,
Oh,
where
yeah.
you have to have like the upbeat part right before the closing, right before they conclude.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's and it actually, it does show a little bit more of like people doing their jobs, right? People are listening in, they're doing a little detective work, they're doing the chase. But it's one of those things that it's very much part of the formula, it feels a little bit procedural. One moment. So next, Sinclair and they don't want any harm to come to Adira. So they decide to set a trap. And this is what happens. Sinclair, he speaks to Jakar. And he tells him that there is some merchandise that will have to give him a lot of leverage in negotiations. And Jakar's like, oh, okay, cool. I will make sure that, we can get our hands on that. He says that EarthGov wants a compromise, and they know that the Narn will show gratitude. The gratitude is worth the price. He also offers to give Talia Winters like her services to verify the honesty of like the authenticity of the merchandise. And so Jakar's like, oh yeah, sure. That's great. Whatever you need. But this is where they set the trap. Dracus is gonna meet to make the deal. He's the one he's gonna try to swoop in to figure out what this merchandise is. Because surprise, Jakar is the one that helped Dracus smuggle things onto the station. By the way, he's showing his treachery again. When Jakar meets with Dracus to make the deal, Dracus is surprised that a telepath is present. He's like, wait a minute, I don't want anybody fumbling around in my mind. And she goes, hey, Talia goes, hey, don't worry. Don't worry about anything. Don't think about anything that you don't want me to know. And then she straight out says it, Like, for instance, the location of where Adira is right now. And at this point, Dracus is surprised. He, of course, cannot help but to think about where she is. And that's when Talia reads his mind. Sinclair then dispatches security to go to the location. And, Dracus tries to run. Lando intercepts him, does the great one punch, the sci-fi show One Punch, knocks him out. And they save Adira. At this point, this is what I think is hilarious. Lando thanks Jakar for helping him save him from the horror of the Centauri Republic, and Jakar is just like steaming mad. He walks off frustrated, and he just can't believe that he helped his enemy, save himself. This again shows the dynamic between those two, which I think is starting to shape up to be pretty great. Garibaldi, he runs into Ivanova and he shares with her, hey, I think I found out what was going on with those data breaches, those breaches of the Gold Channel. And she's, oh, wait, he says like, yeah, I think I know what happened with those errors, but I fixed it now. And he goes, I don't think it will happen again, will it? And she goes, nope, it won't. And it's just, this is where I think Garibaldi and Ivanova are coming to kind of like a common understanding of each other. At this point, we're seeing Ivanova is willing to bend the rules in her favor, but she's not trying to put anybody at risk. And Garibaldi knows about it. And he's not going to rat her out. So I will admit, Nita, you are correct. Garibaldi is not a snitch. So now we're coming to like the overall conclusion of the episode. Adira and Lando meet in the docking bay. Sinclair has persuaded Dracus to set her free, so she's no longer a slave. Lando gives her the family heirloom and tells her to wear it proudly as a free woman. She apologizes for hurting him, but he just simply asks her to come back someday, and she says that she will, and she waves goodbye. So overall, we have a pretty happy ending for Adira. She is no longer a slave. She gets a nice, pretty brooch, and she gets to get off the station happily ever after. What are some of y'all overall thoughts of the episode and the ending for Adira?
It is nice that through all of the corruption, she was rewarded in the end, or granted her freedom in the end. But even before what you just summed up for us, he was like, you could stay. And it's like no sense of understanding or appreciation of like the trauma that a slave and forced sex worker must have endured, that you think that you are now or ever could be a compatible partner for her. And when you're like, wear this in remembrance of all the bullshit that we put you through, and hold it, like wear it as a chain that is gonna like be a what is it, a zip lead that's gonna yank you back to me in this position again one day. And her response, like, yeah, sure, no, that's just what victims do to like get through to the next day. She ain't coming back, fool. You're not never gonna see her again. I'm done.
Yeah, the attachment style type thing. He thinks that that she belongs to him. I agree. I very much agree. And she's just she obviously has the trauma responses. Like, yeah, just agree with the fool and move on. Like, I recognized all those behaviors.
Right. And it makes you think, okay, she's free, but she's Centauri. So where's she going to go? Is she going back to Centauri Prime? Is she going to go to another colony? Or will she mingle with other aliens for the time being? It's kind of vague as far as like what she actually does with her freedom. And we got a little bit more information about the obsession with power and positions that the Centauri Republic is. So, how different is her life going to be now that she's free?
I think it is going to be different because she still has to deal with those power struggles just from a different perspective. In order to get anywhere in life, she's still going to have to go steal information from people, which is what she was doing as a slave anyway, except for this time she actually has the opportunity to benefit from it.
Mm-hmm.
None of that is good in any their society is good. It really did define what Centauri culture is, like how they work. It was a nice way of playing in storyline what their culture was all about. But yet again,
yeah, cool. All right, any final thoughts?
It was my favorite episode yet, and I'm so glad that we were able to go over it today. Some of my favorite topics are popping up in this episode, and when you were like, we're gonna put a pin in that and talk about it later, it's like, yes, okay. So this isn't like a one-off kind of situation. This theme is gonna run throughout the show to give us more depth to discuss those things in the future.
Like between both stories that were going on that were very, very separate, they both had the theme of I'm going to break the rules for me. And in one theme, it was very selfish for them to break the rules for themselves. But in the case of Garibaldi and Ivanova, her breaking the rules and him breaking the rule by not snitching was them breaking the rules for something positive, allowing her to, speak to her father for the last time.
Yeah.
There's a nice little balance between the two. It's like, I'm going to use my power to reach out to my family in a loving way versus I'm using my power to keep my status.
And that also is reflected with Sinclair. He basically says, hey, Earth Central wants us to do anything we can to avoid war. And so he allows quite a bit of flexibility with the ambassadors and with his own staff to achieve that goal. So it's a lot of rule breaking, but it's for this one objective that will allow for the crew to achieve their goal, for the station to achieve its purpose. And I think that could be the reason why Sinclair was the ideal person. He wasn't very strict, even though he is all about protocol. He's more about the letter of the law. I'm sorry, he's more about the meaning of the law versus the letter of the law. So he's given flexibility that shows his confidence in his staff to do the right thing. And it also shows like the type of leader he is. We will see more of this style play out through this season, and I'm excited to share it with you all. So I'll say thank you all for joining us for this episode of Voices in Hyperspace. I'm gonna sign off. This is Damian, aka Legendary Black Lion.
I'm Mel. I'm Mel's Asylum from Mel's Rebellion.
I'm Nita, and I like to paint.
Great.
This is Sunday. Good night, y'all.
All right. Thank you all very much, and we'll be looking for y'all next time. Bye.